We came, we saw, he died.
It is great to be here in free Benghazi and in free Libya.
The new government is consolidating the control over the country.
Men sent to the front line, armored vehicles on their way to Tripoli. Libya's eastern forces and their leader Khalifa Haftar are showing their intent to take over the Libyan capital and overthrow the government backed by the UN.
Since the removal of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, Libya has plunged into relentless turmoil, unable to establish stable political structures. The initial attempt to overthrow Gaddafi's regime spiraled into a complex civil war with multiple phases. From 2014, Libya has been divided between rival administrations, leading to the rise of numerous militias and a pervasive state of lawlessness. In this episode of African Biographics, we explore the intricate web of conflict and instability that has defined Libya since Muammar Gaddafi's fall. Muammar Gaddafi came to power in Libya in 1969 by leading a military coup that deposed King Idris. Gaddafi transformed Libya from a monarchy into a socialist state, utilizing nationalized oil revenues to finance extensive infrastructure projects as well as significant advancements in healthcare and education. Gaddafi initially aimed for pan-Arab unity, aspiring to unite Arab countries. However, over time, his focus shifted to Pan-Africanism, advocating for African unity and collaboration. Despite these initiatives, Gaddafi's regime was notorious for severe human rights violations, political oppression, and sponsoring international terrorism, including the 1988 Lockerbie bombing. Also, Gaddafi's contentious leadership attracted worldwide condemnation, resulting in economic sanctions and increasing Libya's isolation due to his backing of militant groups and involvement in regional conflicts. In February 2011, inspired by the sweeping influence of the Arab Spring, Libyans began to rise up, with the initial protests starting in Benghazi and quickly spreading to other cities. This led to violent confrontations between Gaddafi's security forces and the opposition. In March 2011, the United Nations Security Council decided to implement a no-fly zone over Libya. Subsequently, Nato launched airstrikes aimed at protecting civilians.
Gaddafi declared he would show no mercy to his own people. He compared them to rats and threatened to go door to door to inflict punishment.
It was Muammar Gaddafi, Obama said, who was the main reason for war. He was about to launch a massacre of his own people.
It was not in our national interest to let that happen.
In July of that year, the National Transitional Council, the NTC, was officially acknowledged as the legitimate government of Libya on an international level. In the subsequent weeks, the African Union, along with 60 other countries, also declared their recognition of the NTC. During this uprising against Gaddafi, numerous rebel groups surfaced throughout Libya. Also, army units defected in the eastern region, where the regime quickly collapsed, and in the western Zintan area, enabling rebels to utilize existing infrastructure and gain an advantage when Muammar Gaddafi's regime finally fell. Most of these rebel units were loosely organized groups of fighters with minimum coordination among them. In August 2011, Muammar Gaddafi went into hiding when anti-Gaddafi rebels overwhelmed Tripoli, Libya's capital. On October 20, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi was captured and killed when opposition forces seized the city of Sirte. Shortly after his death, the NTC declared Libya a free nation and announced plans to hold elections within 8 months. Libya's NTC devised an 18-month transition plan, but its weak structure quickly began to disintegrate. Following Gaddafi's fall, various rebel factions swiftly fortified their positions and looted arms depots and government offices to prepare for the post-war power struggle in Libya. The situation deteriorated over the years, and by 2016, Libya had an estimated 20 million weapons for its 6 million people. These arms flowed through various channels, often ending up with terrorists and local militias due to the country's porous borders. This rampant arms trafficking allowed Libyan militias to assert their own status within the broader social fabric. Weapons that were supposed to be surrendered at the end of Libya's revolution remained in the hands of these rebel groups, thus solidifying their power. Additionally, some militias engaged in protection rackets or were hired to guard buildings and resources desired by rival groups. The post-Gaddafi period offered significant business opportunities as the various militias coerced weak authorities into employing their members in public service. Other rebel groups who were not politically motivated used their firepower to dominate cross-border smuggling operations involving drugs, subsidized goods like gasoline or flour, as well as illegal migrants from African countries heading to Europe. This lucrative trade flourished in the absence of a strong state, complicating Libya's NTC's efforts to establish proper control over the country. Rather than being disarmed, Libya's numerous militias were financially supported by some political parties who were seeking to ensure their own protection. Also, politicians attempted to co-opt former rebels by placing them on the state payroll as a supposed regular security force or army. Any militia, even Islamist militants like Ansar al-Sharia, gained access to government funds. It is said that the transitional government, which governed Libya from the fall of Gaddafi until the 2012 national elections, disbursed over $1.4 billion to former rebels and individuals who claimed to have fought against Gaddafi. This, combined with the absence of a unified army or police force, allowed various militias to take control of nearly the entire country. In July 2012, the NTC handed over power to the newly elected General National Congress, the GNC. Part of the GNC's mandate involved drafting a new constitution, establishing a legal framework for governance, and overseeing the disarmament of the various militias that had emerged during Libya's revolution. Unfortunately, the GNC faced significant challenges over the next 2 years, including internal divisions, political infighting, and the rise of armed groups competing for power. Libya was falling into a state of disarray, and in September 2012, Islamist militants launched an attack on the United States consulate in Benghazi, resulting in the deaths of 4 Americans, including US Ambassador Christopher Stevens. Libya's discovery of oil in the late 1950s transformed its economy, making the oil sector vital as it contributes to the majority of the country's GDP and government revenue, significantly shaping its geopolitical and economic landscape. After the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, various factions recognized Libyan oil production as crucial for securing power in a nation ravaged by political and military conflicts. In 2013, a man by the name Ibrahim Jadran became one of the first key figures in the fight for control over Libya's oil. Following the 2011 uprising, Libya's transitional government had assigned Ibrahim Jadran and his estimated 2,500 rebel fighters to protect the oil fields and ports in Libya. As the commander of this newly formed Petroleum Facilities Guard, the PFG, the government force responsible for safeguarding national oil facilities, Ibrahim Jadran broke away from the government. Jadran then went on to impose blockades on oil facilities, which hampered oil production, and he also demanded the creation of a special commission to investigate the management of oil revenue during Muammar Gaddafi's tenure. Ibrahim Jadran blockaded oil export ports in 2013 and 2014 to demand more autonomy for eastern Libya, particularly over oil revenues, and to protest Libya's national oil companies' alleged corrupt management. This blockade by Ibrahim Jadran cost the state over $30 billion in lost oil revenues. In March 2014, Ibrahim Jadran gained international attention by allowing the oil tanker Morning Glory to depart from the eastern port of Sidra under the North Korean flag. This unauthorized shipment of oil was part of his broader effort to sell oil independently of the Libyan government, which he accused of corruption and neglecting the eastern region's needs. In retaliation, the Libyan government declared the shipment illegal and sought international assistance. The United States Navy intervened, intercepting and boarding the Morning Glory in international waters off Cyprus. The vessel, Morning Glory, was then escorted back to Libya under United States military authority with its cargo returned to the Libyan government. Ibrahim Jadran continued to be a controversial figure in the battle for Libya's oil resources following the Morning Glory incident. Despite multiple efforts by successive Libyan governments to negotiate with him, Jadran maintained considerable influence because of his capacity to block or permit oil exports in Libya. In 2016, his position was significantly weakened when he lost control of the oil terminals to the newly formed Libyan National Army, the LNA, led by General Khalifa Haftar, another major player in Libya post-Gaddafi. Since Muammar Gaddafi's fall, Libya's militants had engaged in sporadic intra-city conflicts, typically lasting from a few hours to a few days until some form of ceasefire was brokered, allowing residents to resume their daily lives. However, the conflict in Libya escalated to a new level in May 2014 when Khalifa Haftar, a general from the Gaddafi era, launched an offensive against radical Islamists. Khalifa Haftar would become one of Libya's most polarizing figures. Born in 1943 in the eastern city of Ajdabiya, Khalifa Haftar was once an ally of Muammar Gaddafi, playing a key role in the 1969 coup that brought him to power. Their relationship soured in the 1980s following a disastrous Libyan military campaign in Chad. What happened next with Khalifa Haftar remains unclear. Some sources suggest he spent the following years in incarceration, while others claim he informed the Chadian government of his decision to oppose Muammar Gaddafi. This allegedly led to the establishment of training facilities for him and his men near N'Djamena, the capital city of Chad, as part of the Libyan National Army, the LNA, the military wing of the opposition Libyan National Salvation Front. Around this time, connections between Khalifa Haftar and the United States CIA began to surface. According to the New York Times, American intelligence services, with the approval of then-President Ronald Reagan, funded and assisted in training Khalifa Haftar and his 350 troops in sabotage and other guerrilla skills in Chad as part of efforts to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. When Hissène Habre's government in Chad was overthrown in 1990, the United States sought a new refuge for Khalifa Haftar and his troops. This is according to the report. After unsuccessful attempts to settle them in Kenya and in then Zaire, now the DRC, the United States government ultimately had to grant Khalifa Haftar and his men asylum and bring them to the United States. The next chapter of Khalifa Haftar's life took an unexpected turn as he spent the next 20 years living a seemingly quiet life with his family in suburban Virginia in the United States. This period fueled further rumors of his involvement with the CIA, especially given that his home in Falls Church, Virginia was just a few miles from the CIA headquarters in Langley. The New York Times reported that Khalifa Haftar himself admitted to frequently speaking with the CIA during his time in Virginia. Despite living in the United States, Haftar remained in contact with Libyan opposition groups, and he returned to Libya in March 2011, reassembling former members of the army units he once commanded. Haftar maintained a low profile, mostly staying in eastern Libya until February 2014 when he released a video in front of a Libyan flag announcing a coup d'etat against the GNC due to its failure to address the apparent growing Islamist threat in Libya. His televised announcement was met with great scorn and ridicule in many parts of the world, but this did not deter the general's resolve. In May 2014, Khalifa Haftar launched a military campaign called Libya Dignity against the Islamist group Ansar al-Sharia as well as other Islamist factions. This war that Khalifa Haftar initiated in May 2014 marked the beginning of Libya's full descent into total chaos. In his initial public statements, General Haftar branded Islamists of all kinds as being terrorists. In his numerous addresses, General Haftar declared that the Islamists had only three options, that is, to either leave the country, be killed, or get arrested. This rhetoric by the general unsurprisingly united the previously warring Islamist factions against him. In retaliation, the Islamists formed alliances under the name Libya Dawn and launched offensives in other parts of the country. Eventually, fighting erupted at Tripoli's international airport between the Libya Dawn coalition, which controlled Tripoli and much of western Libya, and Khalifa Haftar's Libya Dignity coalition, which controlled parts of Cyrenaica and Benghazi in eastern Libya. This escalation turned the conflict into a full-scale civil war. Also, elections in June 2014 saw a significant defeat for the Islamists who previously held government power, with voter turnout representing less than half of those who were eligible to vote. Islamist lawmakers in Libya's GNC rejected the election results for this new parliament, which was to be called the House of Representatives. Also, the coalition of armed Islamist groups, Libya Dawn, went on to reinstate the outgoing GNC in Tripoli, which became known as the National Salvation Government, the NSG. At the same time, the newly elected parliament, the House of Representatives, convened in the eastern city of Tobruk under the protection of General Khalifa Haftar's forces. The absence of central authority in Libya created an opportunity for the militant extremist group ISIS. Exploiting the power vacuum and local conflicts, ISIS gained control and recruited fighters, while other militants held much of Benghazi and Derna. ISIS power in Libya peaked in 2016 with the capture of Sirte, its most significant stronghold outside of Syria and Iraq. The rise of ISIS in Libya destabilized the Sahel region, facilitating the flow of arms and militants, which worsened conflicts in Mali, Niger, and Chad. In July 2018, General Khalifa Haftar announced that his LNA had recaptured Derna, the last ISIS outpost in eastern Libya. Despite this, ISIS fighters remained active, operating small desert camps and staging occasional attacks in Libya. As I alluded to before, Libya had descended into full chaos, and in response to the escalating conflict and ensuing humanitarian crisis, the United Nations facilitated negotiations between the rival factions in Libya, including General Khalifa Haftar, leading to the Libyan Political Agreement, the LPA, which was signed in December 2015 in Skhirat, Morocco. Under the terms of the United Nations-led LPA, a Government of National Accord (GNA) was established in Tripoli. Despite having strong international backing, Libya's newly formed GNA struggled with domestic recognition as the House of Representatives and its armed allies, including General Haftar, refused to consent. In August 2018, violence erupted in Tripoli, the capital, disrupting a period of relative calm. However, the United Nations quickly brokered a ceasefire between the involved militias in September 2018. Meanwhile, the struggle for control of Libya's oil intensified. In January 2018, the House of Representatives in the East appointed its own governor to the eastern branch of the central bank, deepening the division between the bank's eastern and western branches. In June of that year, Ibrahim Jadran, the warlord that I mentioned earlier, and his forces returned and seized control of the oil ports of Ras Lanuf and Es Saida. But General Khalifa Haftar and his forces managed to recapture these ports from Ibrahim Jadran, and the general declared that all oil ports under his control would be managed by the Eastern National Oil Corporation, supported by the House of Representatives, with revenues being directed to the eastern branch of the central bank. However, the international community quickly reaffirmed its commitment to trading exclusively with the Tripoli-based National Oil Corporation. Tensions between Libya's GNA and General Khalifa Haftar's LNA escalated in April 2019 when the general launched an offensive to capture Tripoli.
Thank you for joining us. Libyan troops commanded by warlord Khalifa Haftar say they've advanced into the southern outskirts of the capital, Tripoli, in a push against the internationally recognized government. The UN and world powers are demanding they halt their offensive. Fighting has been going on around the old international airport. Haftar says he wants to, in his words, liberate the city. But the government in Tripoli has the UN support, and soldiers loyal to it say they've captured at least 145 of Haftar's men. From Tripoli, Mahmoud Abdel Wahad reports.
Haftar's ambitions were supported by substantial international backing. Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia provided military aid, funding, and political support, seeing the general as a counterbalance to Islamist militias and a means to secure regional stability. The offensive by the general began on April 4, 2019, with his forces rapidly advancing towards Tripoli. However, they stalled on the outskirts, making only minimal gains over the next year.
A setback for Haftar, who has ordered his troops, in his words, to liberate Tripoli. It's raising fears of a major confrontation with the UN-recognized government.
At the GNA's request, Turkey sent troops to Tripoli in early 2020 to bolster the city's defense, increasing their presence ahead of the GNA's counter-offensive. United Nations-led mediation efforts made little progress as the conflict intensified and civilian casualties rose through May 2020. The resulting chaos in Libya allowed foreign mercenaries, including Russia's infamous Wagner paramilitary company, to exploit the situation and establish a presence within the country, even taking control of some of Libya's oil fields. In August 2020, violence eased as the GNA declared a unilateral ceasefire, and General Khalifa Haftar ended an oil blockade shortly after, paving the way for a nationwide ceasefire signed in October. This ceasefire led to the formation of the Interim Government of National Unity, the GNU, in March 2021, aiming to unify Libya's fragmented political landscape and prepare for national elections. The formation of the GNU raised expectations for political stability and the prospect of holding parliamentary and presidential elections in December 2021. However, the elections were indefinitely postponed due to lack of preparation and ongoing disagreements among various political forces about the legal framework for the election. From 2011 to the present, Libya has experienced profound upheavals and struggles. The overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi initially sparked hope for a democratic transition, but instead, the nation was plunged into prolonged conflict and fragmentation.
Asked on U.S. TV program Fox News Sunday what his biggest mistake in office has been, U.S. President Barack Obama said this.
Probably failing to plan for the day after what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya.
Despite international efforts and some progress toward political agreements, Libya remains a nation in search of stability and recovery.
In the heart of Tripoli. This is where thousands of people are here to commemorate the 13th anniversary of the Libyan revolution that toppled longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Now Libya has been engulfed in conflict and political division since then, but people are here celebrating still. We've talked to a few, and this is what they had to say.
The February 17th revolution means change from the dictatorship to a democratic and civil state. It was necessary and came after decades of repression and injustice. Today means so much to the Libyan people. Despite the conflict, the political divisions, the difficult economic situation, all these people celebrating is evidence that the revolution will continue and we will succeed.
Don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.